Welcome to Women at Work by Hey, Season 6, Episode 2. This Season 6 feels different, you might have noticed that. We're now on a new set in the headquarters of Hey in Barcelona. You can also now watch the full interview, and our schedule has slightly changed since we are sponsor-free. We will release a new episode every month, so make sure you hit the follow button to get notifications, and we will pop up on your feed. You see, every cloud has a silver lining, I guess. We mentioned it here on our first episode with Samar Macaron. If you haven't listened to it yet, everything that woman said was amazing. These are not easy times in general for feminism and basic human decency. But even if the horrors, which are many, persist, so do we. Feminism continues to challenge who gets to design, who gets seen, and who gets heard. There's still inequalities, still bias embedded in institutions and industries, but conversations like this matter. They shift things. Slowly but surely. My name is Anne Guerra, and by my side are Veronica Fuerte, head of Hey, and Claudia Laporte, our producer. This is Women at Work by Hey, a podcast that aims to continue gathering incredible female creative and leadership knowledge that hasn't been as widely awarded, mentioned, or taken into account as men's. And yet, these are women who are actively reshaping the creative industry. Is there anything more fascinating than how design shapes the way we understand the world, the invisible structures, the systems behind communication, the way information becomes experience? Our guest today is a voice of wisdom in the field. Nicola Ryan, welcome to Women at Work by Hey.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here. Nicola,
how are you? Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Sun is shining. It's a good day. How are you?
Nicola Ryan, VP of Product Design at Condé Nast. You are a designer whose work navigates the space between systems, storytelling, and visual communication with both a very rigorous and deeply human approach. You've built a very distinctive and incredibly successful path. But let's go back to the beginning. What first drew you into design? That should be the first question, I think.
Well, what first took me into design? You know what? I think it was, there was no one thing. When I was at school, I was caught between studying maths and studying art. And there were two polar opposite directions. And in the end, I had some amazing teachers in art, and I decided to choose my heart. I went with heart overhead and went into art, and that was, so the rest was history. And through that, I managed to find my way into the particular niche of design that I found myself.
You started as a designer at Pentagram, which is already like an incredible first job to land. What do you remember of that, Nicola, that went to work on that very first day in such an agency? Like, what were you like? What did you feel?
I was when I got my first job at Pentagram, I started off as an intern in Berlin, and then managed to move into London. And I just remember walking in at that London office being absolutely in awe. It was such a phenomenal but privileged position to be in. So many wonderful designers and people to learn from. And it was just, I remember finding it was just such a down-to-earth, warm, welcoming place. It's kind of nothing that I think as a student had expected about, the hallowed halls of Pentagram. It was just very human, very welcoming, down to earth, and it was just a wonderful place to be at.
Did you feel very nervous?
Yes. Yeah. I think I spent, the first, many years of my career feeling constantly nervous, to be honest. Yeah, every day.
And then I saw that you stepped into digital design and UX right after, like probably when the very field was being conceptualized. And I was wondering, why did you go digital? Like, what was there something like you were like, oh, I love this, I need to go into that path?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was at university, obviously everything was still pretty heavily print. I did some animation and screen-based stuff, but it just didn't have the emphasis and the importance that it obviously does now. And I was at Pentagram, and over that time, I remember seeing all of these really interesting things happening outside around web design and how things were changing, for smartphones were coming out and different screen sizes. And there was all this kind of conversation about, well, how do websites look good on different screens that aren't big desktops? And what does it mean to be able to shop on the go? And like all of these new possibilities were opening. And at the time at Pentagram, it was wonderful because we were designing beautiful book covers and identity systems, like beautiful projects. But I just felt almost a bit frustrated at the time because I thought there's loads of people that are a million times better at this than me. But there's loads of stuff over here that's still yet to be defined. And to me, that just felt where the biggest opportunity for designers of kind of my generation to be. You know, there's so much uncharted territory and things to be figured out that to me, that's where like the exciting stuff, the exciting work, I think of my career, of our careers, could take place.
And it was a perfect match between the maths and the arts that you were
exactly. And I think
there,
exactly
right?
that was in the background of like the logic, the numbers, or systems. Like that was, I think, as well in the background pulling me over.
Years later, like the digital landscape and experiences have taken over the world. Like it's just embedded in our day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. How have you felt this transition since you were there, like in the very conceptualization of the whole thing? How did you feel? That was the first question. And the second one, is there any key mantra or thought process that you've always followed in that path?
Such a good question, and not one that people usually ask. But, you know, I think when things started first going digital, it was like, first it was this big speciality, right? We had to have UX architects and UI designers and then UX designers and information architects and all of these different specialisms because it was so unknown. And with that, there also became a really big process. You know, you had to do these steps and you had to do these things to make sure you could build this very complicated digital product. And engineering time is really expensive. So you had to make sure you did this all really well. Otherwise, you end up wasting a lot of time and money. And because of that, it always felt like this thing that was a step away from a lot of designers, I think. And I think designers, a lot of particularly graphic designers in the background I came from, were kind of almost a bit afraid to step into it. And so you had a lot of people coming from different places to do this. And I think now it's just part and parcel of how we design, right? If you're a designer, a graphic designer, communication designer, whatever kind of designer, you're just thinking about digital as just another surface, another medium that you're designing through. And I think the tools and the ways that we can design for medium have just designed for digital have just become so much more accessible that it means a lot more people just do that as part and parcel of what it means to design. It's not such a specialist skill anymore. But for me, what's always stuck through, and I think as things have developed, have gone through peaks and troughs of this being kind of broadly rejected or accepted and valued. And I think at the heart of this, everything that we do, like creativity still sits at the heart, whether you've got a big process, whether it's someone is just creating something themselves. Like at the end of the day, everything's centered around good ideas, great craft, original thought, and problem solving. Like you can layer on as many specialities and as much process as you like, but if you haven't got a good idea and you're not really solving the problem and you're not really creating something that someone wants to use, you're not really, that's what design is all about. And it's always been about that to me.
And maybe now more than ever, right?
Totally. With AI around, like that matters more than ever. I still constantly believe that there's that human judgment, and it sounds a bit trite to say taste and judgment, but it really is. AI can come up with loads of stuff, and some of it's not bad, but it ultimately comes down to people to really figure out what's the right thing to do and why that is the right thing to do.
You mentioned how you were designing all these beautiful books and pentagram. And is there anything of physical design that you've always stuck with when turning into digital, like colors or shapes, or is there anything that was really drawing your attention?
I think one of the frustrations of going into digital at that early time was like typographic control. Like you had, going from like working in InDesign to then being on the web, and you have such limited control over, kerning and just the fine detail and alignment of what you can actually do. And that's something that I'm so excited about. Like now in more recent years, we're able to kind of get back to that much more detailed control. And that's really exciting. But just that finesse is something that has really stuck with me. Like the fundamentals, color, hierarchy, type, and making sure that stayed through what I do.
Since then, you've been working with and leading digital multidisciplinary teams in big information companies such as The Times, The Telegraph, and of course, Condé Nast. The way we access information has changed so drastically. I wonder whether you feel we're now more informed, less informed, or just differently informed than before?
That's such a good question. I think it's just different, isn't it? I think we are, like, what I certainly see in my role, and we spend a lot of time talking to users and looking at user behaviors and how people are consuming like media and information. People are still spending a lot of time consuming information, but they are, just as they might have read a magazine or a newspaper, but they're not just looking at one or two or three magazines or newspapers. Right. They're looking at so many different sources, so many different creators. And so it's just they have a much larger breadth of different sources than they ever used to. And the content is often a lot more bite-sized, isn't it? There's less likelihood of people going deeper, people really reading a really long story or spending a really long amount of time with something. It's a lot of sort of here. Mm-hmm. So I think people get the breadth, but within their own area, their own bubble. I think the algorithms make sure people, I think one thing we do lose a lot of, and I think the brands that I work with really have still the value to offer, is just that serendipity. The beauty of a magazine is you don't know what's in it. And there may be an article that on the face value of it, you think, God, that's absolutely nothing of interest to me. But because it's there, you read it and there is something really interesting about it and you learn something from it. But when you're you're on Instagram, you're probably not going to click through to that. And so I think that serendipity that you only get sometimes through a really focused experience gets lost. And I think that we're kind of losing a bit of that ability to broaden our own horizons because of that.
Definitely. Someone told me the other day that design has shifted from concept to narrative, and now I can stop thinking about it. And there's this phrase by Margaret Atwood, and she explained how human beings, we understand storytelling before we know how to read and write, which I think is fantastic because it's kind of us, storytelling. And you always explain that storytelling is something you embed in your practice every day. I would love to know why.
I think storytelling is just, it's like who we are as humans. Right? It's just something that has persisted before, like you say, before we could read, before we could write. Back in, when we're all cave people and sitting around a fire in a cave, people told stories. That was just the way of passing information from generation to generation. It's a way to tell and pass information down, and it works for a reason. It's compelling. It captures interest. It sticks in your mind. As designers, I really love that idea. Like, designers moving from concept to narrative, because I think it is how do we take people on. It's not just about an idea, but it's how you take people on that journey and how you turn it into something people really remember and they can repeat. And it's definitely part of something that I end up doing day in, day out, whether it's about the design itself, whether it's about working with other people. Like, it's the whole way we communicate, isn't it? Is all that stories.
Do you think design is more demanding nowadays because of all these things you need to take into account, like storytelling and understanding, like the zeitgeist we're right now in?
Yes. I mean, I'm curious if we asked this question to someone 50 years ago, and everyone feels their generation is, it's getting harder and harder. But I do think the bar is going up and up and up. And I think it's kind of exhilarating and petrifying at the same time is that AI is raising that bar for us. It means that we can do a lot more than we ever thought we possibly could, but we have to figure that out and you have to learn that. And designers are expected now, right, to tell stories, to come up with the ideas, to make the product, sometimes to build it as well, and actually put it out into the world and market it, and the full package. But I do think I think that's really exciting for designers overall, because I think designers by their nature are curious and I think driven by ideas and ambitious. And I think all of these tools and technologies are actually enabling a lot more designers to really kind of do what they've wanted to do for a really long time. But it is hard. It is hard. There's a lot to learn. It's constantly changing.
How important is reading for you?
That's a really good question. I think reading is, I've gone through a long period of not reading very much. I have young children, and to be honest, I never get the time to read. But more recently, I've really gotten back into it because I think being transported into another world is part of it. But it's interesting. I think what I would have said is what I read has changed a lot. When I worked in news, all my time was spent reading, 5 different news apps every day and understanding what story they were telling, how they were doing it differently. Whereas now I'm much more in a longer form moment, and I love at the minute to get immersed into different worlds and what's going on. And it's what I found really powerful about that is it helps transport you. And that's something that I, just in life is a really helpful thing to sometimes you just need.
Definitely. You need to let your mind wander. And yeah, I think for creativity, it's really important. I teach in a design university and I teach editorial design in that master's, but I teach narratives and storytelling. And I always say to my students, like, if you need to communicate stories, you need to read. Like, the design part is really important, but of course you need to understand the underlying story there, because you're going to be storytellers. What is one key thing apart from storytelling you think that digital designers or designers in general need to take into account when designing? What is the biggest mistake a designer can do nowadays?
I think, and I talk a lot about this with my team, is I think particularly at this moment, designers working in this area have to be curious. Like, you have to have this idea of a growth mindset, which sounds really cliched, but you have to be wanting to keep learning. You have to be hungry to learn, because things are changing so quickly. And if you're not curious and you're not pushing and you're not asking those questions, like to your point about reading, it's like if you're not seeking out that information and following paths that interest you, you're going to get left behind. And the biggest mistake you can do is just think that the world isn't changing at the minute and just keep doing what you're doing, because the world is changing around all of us. And you can either try and figure that out, or you will get left behind.
And when you start a project, what is the first question you ask yourself?
When we're first starting something out, I think, there's lots of different where I end up working and level. There's lots of sort of different steps to kind of getting started on a project. Like, is there a reason to do this from a business point of view? Is there a business case? Is kind of often a big start. But when we actually get to that, like, we've agreed we're going to do this, there's a real reason and business case around this. It's really focusing on the person who's going to be using this at the end of the day, and like, what is the reason we're creating this? Like, what are we trying to do for them at the end of the day? What's that real job or that need or that thing that we're trying to do? Because everything comes back to that problem statement, if you will. What's the real crux of the problem that we're trying to solve for here? Because that helps serve as your like guiding lights as you're going through and having to make a lot of decisions. You've got to have things that you keep coming back to help inform that and to help make some of those calls as you go along and determine the direction.
Especially in a situation where we already have so much around us and there's so much noise that we really have to know what are we doing, right?
Totally. You have to have a really clear view of that from the start. You might not know the answer, but you have to be really clear on what that problem is that you're solving. And, you have to get everybody corralled around that same problem, the designers, but also the other people, whether they're your clients or your stakeholders, everyone's got to be on the same page about that so that you make the best decisions to do that as you go along.
We will go back to your leadership and teams that you work with, because that must be, we were mentioning it the other day, like so many people working with you at the same time. You must be crazy that trying to figure that out, how to do it. But I was wondering, are you more of an intuitive designer, and taking intuition as, of course, something that's built on knowledge in the end, right? And wisdom and practice. Or do you usually rely on thinking and data?
So this is, I think, a bit of a controversial topic, right, in digital, and there is, I would say I'm a bit of both, which is a bit of a cop out, but I am definitely a heavily intuition guided person, because I think intuition comes from experience. It comes from seeing the data in previous projects that have run in similar ways. It comes from seeing what's worked, what hasn't, and some of the trade-offs that you've had to make along the way. So intuition plays a big part in that. But having said that, sometimes when you're making quite high stakes decisions, which might involve money, you have to, you're taking a lot of accountability there to do it purely on intuition. So sometimes you have to test these things and really look deep in the data to be able to make that call. And particularly when you've got to work with people who are, responsible for those businesses, you've got to have their trust as well. And data is the language that most businesses speak. So you do have to, it comes back to storytelling, doesn't it? You have to be able to tell your story through data. And a lot of what I try to do is ground my thinking and my decisions and my reasons in, good design, and the rationales are behind some of that, which comes from intuition. But you have to be able to also support that through data. So it's not necessarily driven by data, but it's definitely informed by data.
And in this case, I think data is something like it's very positive, because explaining creativity, it's sometimes very complicated, like why something is going to work and why not, and like why this decision is taken and why not.
Yeah.
That data can feel like something you can base on, right?
Yeah, and I think as well, there's different types of decisions. So there are certain decisions like, should we use this typeface or that typeface? Like that really shouldn't be for most cases, that shouldn't be a data decision. Might be a very small few, but there's some certain things that this is the design aesthetic we're trying to create. This is the best typeface and the best color palette and aesthetic to do so. Certain things like, should this be a big button or should this be a smaller button? That does really impact the number of people that are going to click on it. That might impact the revenue. So that's where those decisions start getting a little bit more complicated, and you do need more data, I think, to inform some of those. So it's also trying to understand where, as a designer, you do just have to have a strong point of view, and where actually it is more of a bigger decision because it impacts money.
Is there something you've unlearned over these years working? Some preconception that you kind of ditched in the end?
Yes, unfortunately. There's certainly things that I've seen, that I would have loved to have seen really work in terms of design, in terms of things that are beautiful, things that are big and expressive, always equaling, the metrics that we want to see, like people spending longer with them, coming back, spending more time. What I've learned is like big, beautiful design doesn't always do the job that you need it to do. It does sometimes for certain things, so don't get me wrong. But when you're really trying to get someone to do something, like buy something or subscribe to something, like if actually functional design can work a lot better. And so what I've really, I think, learned is where you have to be just functional and do the job, and actually where having that, bigger, more beautiful, expressive experience pays off. And sometimes it's, it kills you a little bit to go to make those concessions, but ultimately our job is to figure out the problem we're trying to solve and figure out the best way to do it. And that's all part of it.
The digital landscape is something that's very open, and I think it's been a pathway for a lot of people to feel their community and find it. It should be open to everyone around the world. From your perspective, how do you see accessibility shaping the future of design when we're talking about this digital landscape?
I think more and more so accessibility has to be baked into everything we do, right? Like it shouldn't even be a question. It's just, accessibility is just, in the same way that, I don't know, in the UK, certainly every new building has to have an accessible entrance and has to have accessible facilities and so on. Every website should be built for, and every digital product should be built for everyone to be able to use it. And the European Accessibility Act last year is another good step and reminder for everybody of that. I think the reality of getting to that point sometimes is tricky when you're working with big, like, legacy systems, and there's a lot of work to kind of make sure and bring everything up to that standard. But as designers, it's just got to be part and parcel of what we do. We should know it inside out, and we should just be building and designing to make sure that our products can be used by everybody. Because if we don't, we're leaving a huge number of people out.
Definitely. Designing, I always say, like, it's shaping the world, right? It's just giving a shape to what we think, to what we see, to what we say. And the digital environment right now has a vast influence in everything that we do. It's just indivisible from the physical, right now. And I was wondering, when I was preparing this interview, like, systems are very interesting because they are subtle. They are there, but maybe you can see them, but sometimes you can't see them. It depends on how you look at them. And I wonder, like, depending on who's making those systems, who's designing them, and what perspective they do in, they can have a huge influence, right, in how we comprehend the world.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think whoever shapes these systems, they are really defined. I mean, when you think about, for example, some of the algorithms that's curating and showing our worldview, right? You type something in, you get the results back. That's not a neutral algorithm. That system is being shaped. And I think we're not necessarily aware enough of all of these different systems that are shaping the media world around us. And I think it's something that worries me quite a lot as we go longer term about really how we are making sure we are having a lot of more awareness of that and more, governance of all of this. Yeah, I think that's the scary part is the systems you can't see. The systems that you can see, at least you can work with. But I think there's a lot of systems that you say out there that we don't even notice that are shaping what we see, how we see it, how we perceive the world around us. And you think about the comments that you get surfaced in your social feed, and you think, hey, everybody, the Brexit moment really woke me up to this. But I thought, hey, everybody is clearly, going to vote to stay in the European Union, and then obviously not. And but you were so trapped in our bubbles that it can be a really dangerous place to be.
Definitely. That's why maybe critical thinking is also going to be a very sought after skill in the future, because we need it, right? To question.
Totally. I think that questioning is so important. Yeah.
You now lead a huge team of, again, multidisciplinary professionals from different fields, I presume, and you're soon teaching a workshop on how design leaders build trust here in Barcelona. Yes. You mentioned that influence isn't about having the loudest voice or the best ideas, but about creating the conditions in which good work is trusted. And I thought that was very interesting, very wise. If you had to point to one soft skill that helped you along the way with leading teams, what would it be?
I think it's so many different things, but I think probably the main thing is listening. Like, I honestly think it's under listening. 'Cause listening helps you understand people, and that understanding is knowledge. And when you understand the people that you're working with and the people you're managing and the people that you're trying to influence, the more you understand them, the better you can, it comes back to storytelling, but the better you can tailor your storytelling, the better you can solve problems for them, the better you can collaborate with them because you know what they're looking for. But I think you really have to, I think the thing that's really helped me is spending a lot of time trying to understand people, really. I think whether I'm designing for them or working with them, for them, it's really about understanding people and how they work, what they need, what they're looking for. That's really helped me.
Was it something natural for you to go into that position?
Yeah, I think oddly was. I mean, I think if you'd asked me when I was younger, would I go into a leadership position like this? I don't really think about it very much, but it wasn't something that I knew I always wanted to lead a team and do this. But actually kind of as it came and as it went, the kind of the qualities that I think I end up using every day are just sort of part and parcel of what I've done. I have never really haven't had much formal training how to do it. You kind of figure it out along the way, which I think is partly I'm lucky that I think I've got some of those qualities that have helped me and put me in good stead.
Definitely. It's amazing. Looking at the industry today, do you feel that women and non-binary designers have more space and visibility than before? Or is it just the same structures in place, just rebrand it?
It's a difficult one. I definitely see more women in leadership positions than I think I used to. I remember when I started out as a student, and every kind of place I was looking at interning, I think pretty much every single one was run by a man, right? And every person who interviewed me was a man, and I found it's really intimidating. And my first number of bosses were all men. And it's only my current job and my last job that I finally had a female boss. And massively, to me, it just like unlocked something. It completely shifted, I think, how I felt about work and my kind of comfort level and my confidence. And seeing other women, Condé Nast has got a lot of powerful women in powerful positions. And as well, that's been really inspiring to see how women show up in leadership positions, but how they lead differently to perhaps some of the men that I'd seen before. And it's showing how it's possible to both be human and empathetic, but also be strong and make difficult decisions and be assertive. And they do it, the women, at least that I've observed, tend to do it in a slightly different way to a lot of the men that I've observed. And I think seeing that to me has been really helpful in me figuring out my way. Yeah. But do we have enough women? I mean, I don't think we're not clearly at any point anywhere near equal in that. There's still, I think there are so many, obstacles in the way of women in leadership. But I think, there's certainly times when I've gone, particularly as you start, if you have families, being a leader is relentless and time consuming. And I can certainly see why women might not, start with some very talented women that I see rise up through the ranks and then have children and then decide to take steps back. And it can be really hard to then get back into it. So I certainly think there is a whole lot more we can do to really support women to get to the top as an industry.
Definitely. And also, I think the main thing is to also, I think women like you in your positions and are so inspirational because they create a future that's possible. Like, if you don't see a woman doing what you do, for example, nobody can imagine, I can do it. But if you actually see it, you're like, oh my God, I could do that work. I would love it. I would love to be in that position. So I think creating those possibilities is something really, really important. What changes, apart from maybe this one, would you like to see in the creative industry in like 5 years?
Apart from a major one is for women and progression and more flexible working around that. I do think we've got, not everywhere, there's a real yin and yang, isn't there, of this, about this culture of studio culture and having to be in the office and put in the hours versus, we can be flexible around having a life. I do think there's an emphasis in our industry to have to put in the hours, and I'm also guilty of that myself, but I don't think it's the only way. I think the other changes I would love to see is just a better entry way for people to get into design, because I think it's still similar, if not harder, to when I came into design, that you go through university, which is now in the UK anyway, really even more expensive. And then there are very few graduate jobs. There are very few work graduate programs. You have to work as an intern for free frequently still, or for very, very low pay. Most people can't afford to do that. And so I do think we need more, a much better support, program and across the industry for people to be able to move from universities into jobs and to be able to learn on the job. I also think there's a massive jump from when you finish university and you've done some great projects, but it's very separate from the reality of working in a professional industry, right? And I do think there's much more we could do to perhaps formalize what that looks like in terms of those first couple of years, about people getting more experience in the industry and understanding what it means to work professionally as a designer. I think one of my most valuable years in university, I took a year in industry out. It was like a diploma study you can do between your second year and your third year. And we were kind of encouraged to go and do internships basically for the year. And having to put that portfolio together in the second year. I remember mine being absolutely awful. And it makes you realize what it takes. You have to go and interview to people and you're like, oh yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. And oh yeah, I don't know what this project actually is all about. And I don't even like it. So it really focuses your mind on like, God, I've really got to figure this out because I've got to go and get a job in a year's time. So you come back after that year and you're like, okay, so this is what people want to see. This is what they're interested in. This is how I need to be able to present my work and talk about it. And it really focuses your mind for like what you need to be doing to set yourself up for success. And I was really lucky to have that experience, but I think it's something we should do a lot more broadly as well.
Definitely. And it's super important what you're saying. Like, I always believe that, again, since designers, you're shaping the world, the more inclusive the design landscape, the more inclusive the world would be. And of course, if people that cannot afford to do unpaid internships, that usually has a class background there. And what kind of design are we creating? Like, what kind of people are we getting into the industry? And what kind of vision are we putting out there? If only certain kind of people can go into the industry, right?
Totally.
So that's very, very important. To start finishing the interview, what's one word? I was wondering, because you work a lot with words, and if you had to choose one word to describe your year right now, how is it going? What would it be?
Optimistic.
That's great.
Optimistic.
That's amazing.
I think so. Yeah.
Considering that's very good.
I think you have to be optimistic as a leader, and I think you have to see the positivity and what can be difficult situations. And I think there's a lot to be positive, there's a lot to be negative about, but I think there's also a lot to be very positive about at this point.
That's amazing, because it's the kind of energy that we need right now. Because otherwise, if you look out of the window and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Like, the world is crumbling and everything looks awful. But yeah, optimism is very important. And how would you feel about the future? Is it optimistic?
For design? For the world, no comment right now. No, for design, I am optimistic. I do believe that design continues to have a really valuable role, and at this point in time, a more valuable role, I think, than any point before. I think design is absolutely crucial, and I think the design voice has to just keep remembering what good design is all about, and keep true to those qualities that have pervaded for decades around what good design is. And I think we have to bring that as we shape this new world that we're all entering into.
We'll finish with that, because I think it's perfect, like the perfect ending. Nicola, thank you so much. It's been such an inspiring conversation. We're very, very grateful to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and the great questions, really good questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to everyone listening, thank you. We'll do this because we believe that creativity can and should be a force of change. Until the next episode, take care. As Nicola said, stay curious and, of course, fight the patriarchy.